All right, John T. Hewitt, enterpriser, entrepreneur, writer. Thank you for calling in today.
My pleasure.
What are your methods for collecting information when putting together a book about strategy?
You know, it's a lifetime. I've just yesterday was my 55th anniversary in um, business, and I wrote the book after my about 45 years. So it was a lifetime of collections of my philosophies and a discussion of the journey. I think one of the things in my book that I do different from most people is I talk about my mistakes. And I learned a long time ago that the more successful you are, that just means you made more mistakes than anyone else. So it's a book of the journey, and so I think I have about 20 novel lessons that I can use to help people and improve their lives.
Did you, when you were collecting those over the years, were you doing it with the idea that you were going to write a book one day, or was it just these are things I'm learning and I need to keep track of them in case I ever want to look back at them?
You know, I brought in 5,200 franchisees in my career, and so for since 19 for the last over 40 years, I've had hundreds and hundreds of franchisees, made hundreds and hundreds of presentations. So I sort of carried them in my proverbial hip pocket when I needed them, ace up my sleeve. Never, and it wasn't until about 10 or 12 years ago that I began writing them down. And I was 50 years old, and I had or 56 years old, I had my youngest daughter. And I decided if I didn't live um, until she was older, then I wanted her to be able to learn from my experiences. So I put together a pad of my thoughts and novel philosophy for her so that she would never miss out on that if I died while she was very, very young.
When you were writing down those philosophies starting the 12 years ago, were you just had a notebook and you would write how would you do it? Like a topic and then the
I,
ideas behind it or some stories or
I would just take the notebook. There was no rhyme, no reason. I would just I would just go to the notebook, open it up, and on the next page I would just write my philosophy down. And occasionally I would add to it like an example or something, but mostly it was just the philosophy.
did you find that those changed over time or that they got stories you
They they
had things
changed
happen where stories would change your outlook of them?
they changed a little bit. I perfected them. For example, one of them is and now it's a mission statement of my latest company, and it's having fun improving lives. And when I say having fun, that's one of my philosophies is that thank God it's Monday, not thank God it's Friday. If on Monday morning you're driving to work and you're not looking forward to it, you're going to the wrong place. So life's too short. You got to have fun. And then the second part about it, it used to be when I originally coined it, it was having fun changing lives. And then as I used it over a couple of years, someone came to me and said, "No, no, that I mean, you can change someone's life for the worse." So we changed it to having fun improving lives. So yes, they changed moderately on occasion, but most of them were pretty consistent from the time I of inception.
Did you always put those ideas in notebooks or did you have occasion where you didn't have a notebook around and you had to write it on like a
Well,
different piece of
well,
paper and then collect it later?
well, remember, there's only about 2 dozen, so it's not like I mean I was coming up with one a year or one every 2 years, so it wasn't like every day I'm coming up with an idea. So I would come up with the idea, think about it, whether that was really how I felt, and whether that really made sense and it was novel and unique, and it was a differentiator. And then eventually I was in no hurry to write it down. I wasn't going to forget it. So it's again, there weren't that many of my creations of concepts that are novel. Most of what I've learned in my 55 years is from listening to others and experience.
When you started writing it, thinking, okay, this is going to be a book, and you started writing the book part, how did you set up your schedule for completing that task on a deadline?
Well, it was the perfect storm. I hired a former news person, newswoman that was an anchor on CBS News for 10 years, and she left there and wrote 2 books, and then was looking for her next job, and I hired her into my marketing department. But at the same time, since she had written 2 books, I said, "How would you like to be the ghostwriter of my book?" And she readily agreed to that, and so it just was kind of it just was kind of a just a blessing, and again, sort of a perfect opportunity based on I had known her for 20 years, and it just everything aligned so she could help me and write my book for me. I did all the
How's
talking, and now she wrote it all down.
how's that process work for ghostwriting?
Well, initially we were struggling because she would add. I'm not sure if she thought she was adding value, or if she just was misinterpreting what I was saying.
Hmm.
So we changed after we had written a few chapters, and I wasn't satisfied. What I did is she would come to my office about once every week or twice a week, and she'd record me for about 45 minutes. And I would take a topic, and then I would talk about that topic and examples of it in my career. So, for example, one of my things I learned early on was when my 45-year-old son was 14, and he was very small. He was about 5'9" and only weighed about 130 pounds, and he wanted to play football when he went to high school. And his mom said, "No way, no way, you're going to get hurt." And he was a BC student, but very cocky. So I went to him and said, uh, "Danny," I said, "could you get honor roll if you tried hard?" "Oh, easy, easy." I said, "Okay, then I'll make you a deal." He had never made honor roll. He was now in 8th grade. I said, "I'll tell you what, you make honor roll, you can play football." It worked out perfect. I said yes and left it up to him. He never made honor roll. He never got to play football. So he
That's
was
not how that.
he played all city volleyball for his junior and senior year in Virginia Beach with, 500 over 500,000 people. He made all city team on both his junior year and senior year. He was good at volleyball, and it wasn't dangerous of injury. So I learned to
Story.
say no by saying yes.
Yeah, it didn't end like I thought it was. I thought it was going to end. He got to play football and he got the honor roll, and everybody was happy.
Nope. His mother was very happy because he didn't get to play, and he couldn't blame it on anyone but himself.
Yeah, it's a good move. That's a good move. When
So
you
I've
well
used
then,
that in business a lot. People will come to me with, and I try, one of our principles, we have 10 principles, and our last principle is just say yes. So people will come to me with ideas, or they will make decisions, and they will tell a franchisee, "No, you can't do that." Well, for example, let's say it's a franchisee that wants to overexpand. They want to open next year, they want to open 2 offices, and the representative thinks they can only open 1 office. Well, so instead of saying to them, "No, you can only open 1 office," because we know based on their capability, they're unlikely to succeed with 2. We say, in order to open 2, you need money and people. So you need to show us X amount of dollars and X amount of people, and in order to open a second location. So again, it almost always works out that we get what we want, because we knew they weren't going to have enough money and or enough people to open 2 locations. So we told them yes, and they again, if they're upset, they have to be upset about themselves. They know what we're saying is legitimate.
I like that. It's a little different than thinking you have to control things by saying yes and no, and more of when you say the yes part of just saying, how can I say yes? What steps have to happen?
Yep,
I like that.
that's one of the again, our 10th principle, 10th and last principle is just say yes.
When you were putting the book together, how long did it take from the point where y'all started writing it, putting together everything, to when you had your first draft done?
That was about 11 or 12 years ago, so I don't recall exactly, but if I had to put a number on it, I would say 6 or 7 months.
Okay. And when you did your marketing and sales for that, how did you go about that? Were you going through Amazon? Did you go through a regular publisher? How'd that
Yeah,
work?
it was most of 90 to this day, 98% of our sales are on Amazon. So it was a bestseller on Amazon, and I also give them away for free. So if one of your listeners wants to email me, then I will send them a free book. But or else you can get it on Amazon, both the hard copy and the audio copy.
Okay. The audio copy, did you read that yourself, or did you get
I didn't. Um, Peter Drucker, one of my favorite business authors, said people with great strengths have great weaknesses, and a couple of mine are attention to detail, number one, and I'm ADHD, so I don't want to sit there and read the same old story that I just wrote um, for hour number of hours. So we hired a professional to do it.
yeah, it's good to know what you're good at and what you like doing, and then by process of elimination, at least knowing what you haven't tried or what you have tried and you don't like. It's I think that's one of the great experiences of time is you have those more perspectives of, oh, okay, I don't like doing that. It's not, you get rid of the attitude of I'll try anything, and then maybe it happens when you get older, or maybe it's just time that, or the vastness of experience you have, that you get to the point where you go, oh yeah, well, I'm glad that's out there. I'm glad it exists. That's not something I'm interested in.
Yeah, I'm so
So
jealous of my time. They say time is the only irreplaceable resource, and I just don't do anything I'm not good at. So I'm either going to be great at it or not do it. So I gave up golf. I don't go fishing. I don't clean my house. I don't cook food. I don't do things I'm not good at. And that enables me to spend more time fine tuning the things that I am good at.
do you set time aside to kind of not do anything? Or is it always you have something going on?
Well, it depends what you mean by that, but let me say it this way:
Relaxing
that
time, I guess.
yeah, that I don't really set at a time, but a special time of day to just sit there and not do anything. But as a CEO, as a visionary, as a leader, you should spend at least a third of your time thinking and planning and envisioning the future. And I do that. I spend a good 35 or 40% of my time um, on what we're going to do in the future.
How do you think those ideas develop? Do you think it's from within you, like manifest through your own experience, or is could it also be, or you know, split between the two of where it's like the muse or something
It's
outside of yourself?
well. Let me give you an example because it's generally in most things that I envision came from an event or a situation. I was in church 30 years ago, and the minister said, "Every one of us sins every day." And I said to myself, "Wow, I get that I do, but he's admitting that he does." And so that's what I left. And then it didn't come to me until about 2 months later or 3 months later that, wow, if we're not going to listen to God's principles here, this was when I was at Jackson Hewitt, then we're not going to. Jackson Hewitt had 10 principles. We're not going to listen. People, no one in our company is going to listen to Jackson Hewitt principles. So I came up with a new strategy where we took a we made pads of our 10 principles, and with about 50 pads of tear off. And there was a blank space for the name. There were the 10 principles with a box. You would check if someone met the principle or violated it, and then you'd write an explanation. And so we called those mission moments. And so we shared those with other employees because fully knowing that, again, if you're not going to follow God's principles, you're not going to follow John Hewitt's principles. So it was very impactful in improving our culture and making us a more principled organization.
Since you brought up the religion angle, do you have, of your principles, do you have two that you find the most important?
Wow. I'd have to think about that because I think the most important part about being a great leader is, and it's not one of our principles because it's so rare, and that is that I think that my success, I've created two public companies that were worth $1.5 billion with less than a $20 million investment, and I think one of the two reasons that happened was that I always want what's better for the other person than myself. So TR, if you and I are negotiating, and I want what's best for you. If it's best for me too, well, that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, I'm not selfish in putting myself and my needs ahead of yours. So if you have an opportunity to go take another job that you're happier at, that you're making more money at, God bless you. So I think that the number one principle in life is doing what's best for the other person.
Yeah, I like that one. And when I think of leadership traits, because of being in the Marines, I go to the 14 Marine Corps leadership traits, and unselfishness is a great one because it's so easy to understand for people that might be learning about leadership, or even if you yourself are the one learning about it, that it's simply stated that you don't make yourself comfortable at someone else's expense. And that's pretty great. It's so easy to understand, and it does well for you when you're leading people as well. Any group you're in, if they see that you're not taking all the best stuff for yourself, then that's going to help.
Exactly. And the name of my latest company is called Loyalty Brands. And I have 3 people who have been with me 35 years, 5 that have been with me 30 years, 5 been with me 25 years. And that's why I have such great loyalty. And there's only one way to get loyalty, and which is, of course, a pledge of the Marines, right, is to give loyalty.
Yeah. And that's right along with the religion angle too, of the 10 commandments. What are the two most important when Jesus was asked, of course, was no false gods and love your neighbor as yourself. And then if they said, well, what if you only did one? It's love your neighbor as yourself. That's the unselfishness. It's a pretty great rule to live by. With your writing, have you done any other writing besides through your strategy book?
Nothing major. I've been interviewed for thousands of articles. I've been on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, Fox News. I've been on, most of what I do is like this: a communication, a training, and with all my franchisees at every training. At the end of every training, I would come in and say, after 5 days of training, where people with far less experience than me were giving the training, I said, you can't leave here with any question unanswered. I'm the self-proclaimed, I used to be the granddaddy of tax, I would proclaim. Now I'm a great-grandfather, so now I can proclaim myself the great-grandfather of tax. Founded 10,000 offices and done 100 million tax returns.
when you have that time that you use to think about being the CO and strategy, what kind of places, or do you have like a specific environment where that you try to put together that makes it easier for you to think creatively or to think about strategy?
I don't. It usually it comes from when I'm alone. I could be reading, I could be exercising, or sometimes it comes to me in the middle of the night, or it could be driving. But usually it's when I'm alone and with my thoughts, and I, my mind goes 100 miles, like many people or most people, goes 100 miles an hour, and it goes flits around and comes up with novel things. And again, it's not, it's, I'm always thinking about it, and so it's not like every time is a success, right? I'm, I'm wrong 6 out of 7 times.
Do you have times where you're thinking about something and the idea is so clear that it seems like it was presented to you, like it's some sort of a more ethereal idea that's working through you and presenting an idea for your consideration?
If this may be an example of that, when we left Jackson Hewitt, I took my top 5 people with me, and we started Liberty Tax. We didn't have a name, Liberty Tax, and I was driving down West Sahara Boulevard in Las Vegas to visit one of my Jackson Hewitt franchisees, who was one of the people coming with me, and to help him on, it was like April 15th, or near the end of the tax season, and there's this 30-foot Statue of Liberty. And I thought to myself, wow, everyone within 10 miles of here must know where this is. If you said it's a little shopping center that was as big as, it had like 5 7-Elevens, that small, but a 30-foot Statue of Liberty. I said, people must come here, take pictures with their kids. It's a replica of, almost life-size replica of the Statue of Liberty. And so I said, and by the way, there's no Liberty Tax Service that I can think of. And we immediately called my marketing manager and said, check and see if there's any Liberty Taxes in the country, and grab that name if there are. And so we named the company Liberty Tax based on my traveling by that statue, doing a favor for a friend in Las Vegas. The statue, by the way, is still there. That
Yeah,
was
I've seen
25
it.
years ago.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What kind of things kind of ignite your tenacity, things that you care enough about to get involved in and then not give up?
Yeah, give up isn't in my vocabulary. The they got to kill me to stop me. I'm not a general fan of Dennis Rodman, and perhaps most people alive today don't know who Dennis Rodman is, because he's almost my age, and he was a basketball player that was very good at rebounding and very good at upsetting everyone around him, including his own coaches and his own teammates. And I happened to be changing channels one time, and 15 years ago, and the announcer said, "How did you get along with Michael Jordan? I mean, you didn't get along with anyone. Your opponents, the referees, your coaches, your team." He said, "Because Michael and I are one and the same. When we cross that line and get on the court, we would rather die than lose. We give 150%." And so he understood that about me, and I understood we were kindred spirits. So that's the kind of spirit I have: is never say die, and only everyone gets knocked down. Only losers stay down.
With talking about teamwork, how have you seen that work, or how have you been able to foster that in your business, like teamwork and creativity and getting, capturing the market share that you need to capture?
Yeah, that's really tough because most leaders that have been very successful, like myself, are controllers, control freaks, and so it's hard to let go. But I realized a long time ago that if I don't let go and let other people grow, and if I make every decision and they don't think, then the company's limited by my capability in my mind. And wouldn't it be better if we took all dozen of the executive team and they all put your, what would be better? John Hewitt thinking of this is the way we're going to do it, or 12 people getting together, one of which is John Hewitt, coming up with ideas, discussing them, and coming out, isn't it going to be a better plan? So I realized that it's going to be a better plan if I include the other people. And TR, my philosophy is if you're a smart guy, if you and I disagree, then neither one of us is 100% right. What I mean, the answer is somewhere between us. I mean, I might be 95% right, you might be 98% right, but neither one of us is likely to be 100% right. So we need to come up with some kind of a compromise thinking. I do, in order to be better off. And I have to, and so you have to listen, and you have to be able to change your thinking and give credit and respect to everyone on the team.
That makes me think about the acting world where they, and I'm not an actor, but just where they talk about improvisation. And when you're in a improv group, you never say no to somebody's idea. You just say yes. And that goes back to your 10th principle there of always say yes. So what point in your career did you come to that realization? Was it an all of a sudden moment, or was it like, I'm going to try this a little, and then you go back and forth with it?
You know, I was always a remember my goal is always to be do more for everyone else than they do for me, to do what's best for them. So I knew that, and one of my weaknesses is, again, people with major strengths have major weaknesses. One of them
Mm.
is if you're talking to me and giving me an idea, I I may cut you off thinking that I know what you meant. And that causes a couple problems. Number one is I don't always get it exactly right. Number two is you might not think that I understood it, so you're aggravated. And so I've always learned to, I've always been committed to improvement. So I'm not sure when you would say that changed or happened that I came to that conclusion. But I've always, one thing that I'm fanatically committed to is this, that we're going to have the best system in our industry. To have the best system, it has to be improving. So I've always been committed to improvement. And to improve, you have to, I mean, it's so much easier to improve if you get criticism. If you no one ever criticizes you, if you have yes people all around you, you know, if both of us think the same, one of us is useless, right? So I'd always hired people that will argue with me.
I like that. It definitely brings in the different ideas with your idea of always doing what's best for the people around you. What do you base your morality on then? How do you find your moral base that doesn't change?
Well, all morality, in my opinion, starts and ends with God. So you know, I try to look at it through the lessons I've learned from Jesus and God. I don't know any other source of my morality or how we would come to any other conclusion.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's definitely got to be outside of yourself, and then something that doesn't change. I think that's one of the problems that you see in people that do change a lot is they don't have that moral base. As in, there's a TV show called The Wire. It was on HBO some years back, and it's about unsavory things. So it's drug dealing and things like that. But one of the guys says, you got to have a code. That was his quote, Omar. And I think the quote was, a man's got to have a code. And that does make sense. And the sooner you can figure out what your foundational, unchangeable code is, I think the better off you are just in life and definitely in leadership, because while you can learn leadership as you're going, you definitely have to at some point figure out something that doesn't change in it, and that's the morality of it, I think. Thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
one of the things, one of my philosophies that I never hear other people saying is, in school they don't teach you the four most important things. They don't teach you about God. They don't teach you about having a relationship with a significant other. They don't teach you about raising children, and they don't teach you how to use your money to create independence and wealth.
Mm.
And I I learned long ago. I've been a parent for 50, almost 50 years, and I learned that you have to set it. I mean, number one, I have two rules with my children. Someone asked me, only one person of all the tens of thousands of people that I've met, one person asked me, I'm about to have a child. What if there could be one, two, or three key things that 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 I need to know in raising a child? I said, number one, introduce them to God. Number two is set a great example. And so I think that morality needs to be solid. You need to be a rock. You need to not waver, and you need to set an example for everyone around you, not just your employees or but your family, your children especially. You need to walk the line and live a moral life.
It's good advice. Good advice. With the when you were putting your book together, and also since it's about your experience in business, what do you think? Did you learn anything when putting the book together that you didn't think you would learn, or do you have like some important takeaways from writing a book that makes you glad you did that?
The it was so long ago that I'm sure I learned lessons along the way, because in virtually everything I do, I'm a student, right? And I'm learning from virtually every situation, whether I'm standing in line for a cashier or waiting or whatever I'm doing. I'm a student, so I don't remember what any specific lessons I learned. But the most surprising thing about writing the book is the major compliment I get about the book is, "Wow, you admitted making major errors." And so I hadn't realized that my book was different than
Hmm.
others, that I admitted a lot more errors than other authors.
Yeah, I was trying to think about other business books that usually they highlight the good things that the person did and not the things that didn't work out. I can think of a few that talk about things that didn't work out, but it's only as like an aside. It's not the main point of the story. But hmm, that is the experience coming through that you probably learn, if not more, just as much from a failure than you do from a success.
Yeah, human beings, that's almost the only way human beings learn. They say smart people learn from their own mistakes. And I got to tell you, there's not that many smart people.
Hmm. Well, this is a podcast a lot about creativity and content creation, and writing certainly takes creativity. Owning a business and starting business entrepreneurship, surely creativity. Where do you think the drive for creativity originates in general and then with you?
It started with me. Well, first, my drive starts with a fanatical commitment to win. And
Hmm.
that's why we call the book I Compete, because I live to compete. That started as long as I can remember. So from the time the longest memory, that I have. When I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I was a competitor. And so that drive is a result of my commitment to win. I know I have to do certain things to win. Again, I have to have the best system, and I have to have and to have the best system, I know that it has to be improved.
Any other origins or influences you see on your creativity?
It all starts with that competitive nature, and part of the thing that Sam Walton said in his book, Made in the USA. He said, you don't just learn from your competitors, you learn from every one of your experiences. So he was caught and kicked out of Kmart like 12 times, right? And he was going, and they didn't have phones back in the 60s and 70s with cameras, but he would go in and make notes, and he got kicked out of Kmart after Kmart. But he said you learn from when you're on an airplane, when you're in a hotel, when you're eating at a restaurant, when you're pumping gas. You learn from every experience in life. So, one of the lessons I learned that is one of the most important things we do. I learned it when I mean, 50 years ago. I went and had a tooth pulled, and I was a little, he said, be careful when you stand up, you might faint. And I was a little nauseous. And so I sat down, and that night I'm sitting at home by myself about 7 o'clock at night, and the phone rings, and it's the dentist checking on me. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And so one of the things we do in our businesses is after the customer's been in, we depends on the industry, we either wait a day or two and then call them and said, how do we do for you? And people love it. We get a higher retention, we get higher referrals. It's just so valuable. And I learned that just from a dentist making a simple phone call to me to check on me. And I was so awed by that. So you learn from every one of your experiences.
Yeah, you have to always have that observation going on, that while you're at least while you're awake and conscious of it, definitely trying to learn everything you can. Have you ever visualized your drive to win? There was a movie some years ago. I think it was an animated movie. I think it was called Inside Out, where it follows the characters in the story, but inside of the main character's head are the emotions, and they're in like a control room, and they have anger and all these other things that are in there, and each one sometimes takes control of the controls. It's depending on how the emotions go. And I think the point of it was to teach kids or the viewer about emotions. So have you ever visualized your drive to win or any of your other emotions to the point where you're like, okay, I can tell right now that this part of me is not the one that's in the front right now. Like I'm here, I'm relaxing, I'm at a family dinner, I'm doing whatever, that it's over here, but then it can step up at any moment if it needs to, where somebody says something and you're like, whoa, well, now I got to talk about this idea of competition.
I can truly say I can't remember one instance of thinking like that. That sounds like more of an artist mentality. And my mother was an incredible artist. Um, she could play instruments by ear. She never could read a note in her life. She's a great singer, great painter. I can't even color within the lines. So that kind of thinking to me seems artistic, and I'm like zero artistic.
Huh. After the book and the businesses, you don't see that as the creative or the artist
Oh, I
side,
see it.
or
I certainly see it as creative, but not as an art, more of a science than an art. My thinking
okay.
is strategic. I'm a mathematician by ability, And when I started in college to be a mathematician, and I got blessed, and I found my calling at 20 years old. I took an H&R Block course, and I loved it, and so it changed my life immediately, which is great because I don't know what a mathematician would do. I certainly wouldn't want any of those jobs. But I don't think with words and pictures and paintings and music. I think with math.
Interesting. I have, through the podcast and talking to different people, I have started to think more about math, and it's not a thing that I have as a strength, but I do appreciate it as a way of thinking and a language of its own. That I've taken some difficult math classes, statistics and things like that in college, and I could tell different parts of my brain were working than normal. So, do you have that part in your mind where you can click into the math, or is that math part of your brain always going?
I think it's just in everything I don't consciously think about it. I think that's how I react to every
Hmm.
situation.
It's your operating system then,
Right.
is math.
Yeah. It's not
Wow.
something I tap into. It's something I live.
When I was policing, part of it was doing fraud investigations, and I worked with the IRS on a couple things just as part of ACAMs, and they had some mathematicians that work for them. And I remember when I met them, I thought, man, I wonder what a mathematician does other than like the movie Goodwill Hunting of that guy, where they're talking about these jobs he could have, but they never really explain it too well of what you're going to be doing. And this mathematician guy he thought differently than I thought for sure, and differently than most people I've talked to. And you could kind of see him click into that math mindset. And they explained, I can't remember the name of the way they do it, but when they're looking at tax returns, they use some sort of formula and they draw a graph about it, seeing what numbers end with nines or ones or eights or things like that. And there's some sort of natural pattern. I can't remember the name of it, that occurs when you do bookkeeping, and it is like a righteous bookkeeping. But when you cook the books, it looks different because this curve doesn't happen. Any experience with that in the tax preparation, or any knowledge of that through the math side of things?
Yeah, we learned to when you're dealing with large groups of people, there's there's a 5% of them are going to be crooks and going to cheat, right? Whether they're whatever they are. I mean, police,
Yeah,
lawyers,
people are
firemen.
people.
I mean, every in every where whatever society, and so you look for patterns, and so we would look for patterns of impropriety, and then we would set systems to catch those thieves trying to steal. And so, yes, I'm really good at that. Really good at identifying patterns to find out when people are either making mistakes, either on purpose or just because they're inept.
How do you think that the math started with you? Was it just how you thought when you were younger? Was it classes you took in school growing up that pushed you in that direction? Or
Yeah,
I guess,
I didn't realize how smart I was until in fifth grade the teacher had a contest, and what she would do is you and in fifth grade we had just finished learning our multiplication tables, 8 times 9, 7 times 3. And so what would happen is the first person in there was like 25 desks, and the person first desk on the right would stand up and go to the second person, both stand up. She'd show a flashcard and see who got it first. Well,
mhm.
and you could only go around the room once. Well, I won every time, right? So it wasn't. I mean, I didn't realize then the difference between me and other children, that how
Mm.
quick I could do it. So in seventh grade, I had a project, and my dad, we had to do a math project. And can you imagine doing a standing up? I was terrified of standing in front of the class. But my dad taught me to take two-digit numbers and multiply them together in my head by very rapidly. And so I went to the class, and my presentation was here. I'm going to take two. I'm going to pick two people. Each of you say a two-digit number. Back then, they didn't have computers, right, or even even calculators, or I mean, so and each of you write it down, like 17 times 24, and write it down on a piece of paper. And I won 9 out of 10 numbers, right? And so it's simple when you do it this way, and it's 17 times 24. Simple for me. Maybe not everyone thinks mathematically, but you take 17, the 10, and the 24, the 2. 10 times 20 is 200. You take 4 times 10 that's 40. That's 240. You take 7 times 2 is 140. That's 380. Then you take 7 times 4 is 28, and it's 408. And so I can do it that fast. And I just didn't realize until 5th grade that I had that mathematical thinking that no one else had.
Wow. Yeah, I've been reading some math books lately. That's a weird sentence. And I learned this thing about percentages where you can switch percentages. Like you can do 14% of 200. You can say 200 of 14%. And it's the same, like it reverses. And I
Sure.
was wondering, how come they didn't teach us that in school? That seems like a great thing to know that you can do really quick. And then the other rule that I learned recently was about halving and doubling to find the answer of a problem more.
Well,
Where
let
you
me give you, can I give you one that you never heard of? That's easy.
yes, let's hear it. Yeah.
When you multiply anything by 25, so if I said what is 6,488 times 25, how long would it take you to do it in your head?
I try not to do math in
Yeah.
public.
So
I'm going to
I
have to write
can
that out.
I can teach you to do it in less than 10 seconds in your head. So when you multiply by 25, you divide by 4 and add 2 zeros. So 25 times 36. 36 divided by 4 is 9. It's 900. Add 2 zeros. 25 times 76. The 76 divided by 4 is 24. And then I'm sorry, that's 96 divided by 4 is 24. So 96 times 25 is 2400. And it's easier to divide by 4 twice than or by 2 twice than by 4. So if you take a number like 128, what's 128 times 25? If you said what's a quarter of 128, most people would struggle. But if you say half of 128 is 64, half of 64 is 32. So 4 into 128 is 32. Add 2 zeros, it's 3200.
I like
So
that. I'm going to
so
practice it.
25 times 6488 is 162200. Can do it in 1 second.
Yeah, there is the old math that I guess that's what it would seem to me is I remember this guy in church, this older guy, and he was a math teacher, and he had a notebook about how he worked out problems, and I was reading it one time in Sunday school, and I was like, man, this is not what they're teaching us, but this is so much easier. And it was rules like that. I don't know if it was that specifically, but rules that made it so much easier. And I was wondering why they changed it. And then when I look at Common Core math now, and I'm just like, man, you're taking, as an adult or as a person that's been alive over 10 years, when you start reinstalling that operating system of math, that's difficult. And then I just wonder what the point of learning it that different way is if there's an easier way out there. So, any math insight on that? Why Common Core is the way it is?
I try not to get into the thinking those type of people that develop those crazy things. I just don't waste time trying to get into their head and figure out what they're doing. I have enough time figuring out the right way to proceed properly for myself. By the way, my iPad is down to 3%,
Okay.
and I'm not
All right.
plugged in. I'm not plugged in.
What's the best way for people to follow your work and your like social media and things like that?
The easiest, loyaltybrands.com. And, like the opposite, the reverse of brand loyalty, loyalty brands. And it's just JOHN at loyaltybrands.com. And happy to send people a free book, either audio or hard copy, if they just send me an email.
Okay. I think I have a couple of your Facebook links and an Instagram link for loyalty brands, and I'll add that website to it. So that's in the show notes if anybody wants to check that out.
That'd be
Thank you
great.
very much for your time. Good conversation. I like the math stuff.
Thanks, TR. We'll teach you next
All right.
time. We'll do some more.
All right. That sounds good. I'll talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.